Millionaire replaced pregnant wife with mistress on his calendar but forgot her birthday was in gold ink. Have you ever wondered how a single slip of the pen, or in this case, a gleaming stroke of gold ink, could unravel an entire life of luxury, secrets, and meticulously crafted lies? Tonight, we peel back the curtain on the shocking story of Richard Kensington, a millionaire real estate mogul whose prized schedule was a masterwork of precision, until one fateful mistake revealed everything. This is a tale of a pregnant wife's heartbreak, a mistress's relentless pursuit of wealth and status, and the chilling consequences of betrayal. So, settle in and brace yourself for a roller coaster ride of drama, deception, and unbelievable twists. Richard Kensington was not born into wealth. Raised in a modest neighborhood in Philadelphia, he watched his parents struggle to pay the bills. That memory, etched deep into his psyche, pushed him to work relentlessly from a young age. In college, he discovered his talent for deal-making and uncanny ability to talk investors into funding ambitious real estate projects. By the time he reached 35, he had transformed himself into a millionaire, buying lavish properties in Beverly Hills, New York City, and an expansive vacation estate in the Bahamas. In social circles, Richard gleamed with a magnetic charm. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and had a confident stride that could disarm even the fiercest competitor. His handshake alone seemed to exude the promise of lucrative opportunities. Over the years, he became a revered figure, famous enough that his name was whispered with reverence in upper-crust gatherings, and envied enough that rumors circulated about how he had climbed so fast. His wife, Laurel Kensington, maiden name Laurel Crane, came from a respected Philadelphia family. More reserved than her husband, she balanced his brashness with her gentle manner. Their marriage was once considered a symbol of love and stability. She, the loyal spouse who supported him during his sleepless nights building an empire. He, the brilliant entrepreneur who provided her with a life most could only dream about. For a long time, they stood side by side, a dynamic duo until cracks began to form. Before the scandal that would upend their lives, Laurel discovered she was pregnant. The news seemed to bring Richard unprecedented joy. He boasted to his associates about having an heir, even discussing the possibility of naming the child Richard Jr. if it was a boy. Laurel's belly soon became the focus of every family function, every business gala, and every holiday celebration. Everyone congratulated them, assuming the couple was stepping into a new, happier phase of life. But beneath the surface, Richard was changing. He began returning home later than usual and making hushed phone calls in corners of the house. He was more protective of his personal devices, his phone, his laptop, and especially his leather-bound daily planner, in which he wrote everything in black ink except for special occasions, birthdays, anniversaries, major charity events. Those were written in gold ink, a small quirk that Laurel had always found charming. It was a sign of how meticulously he mapped out each day of his life. Little did Laurel know that this golden detail would become the key to revealing a hidden dimension of her husband's life. As the months passed and her pregnancy progressed, her own role in Richard's day-to-day existence seemed overshadowed by the demands of his business dealings. At night, he would retreat to his study, flipping through that leather-bound planner under the warm glow of a desk lamp, scribbling notes, and rarely sharing what was on his mind. It was a picture-perfect life on the outside, but inside those walls, tension simmered, waiting for the moment when everything would explode. Laurel often helped Richard organize his personal events, marking her own reminders on a shared digital calendar. But his old-fashioned planner remained off-limits, viewed by him as a private vault of personal thoughts and crucial negotiations. Over time, Laurel had learned to respect his boundaries. After all, everyone needed a slice of privacy in a high-pressure world. Still, her curiosity about the gold ink entries only grew. While birthdays and anniversaries made sense, she occasionally spotted question marks on certain dates with the same shimmering ink. It wasn't just the planner that raised questions in Laurel's mind. Gradually, she noticed changes in his behavior. He'd become distant, irritable. He avoided eye contact when she asked about his day. He took more business trips than usual, and the phone conversations he had sounded far more personal than professional. She tried to brush off her suspicions, blaming them on her hormonal changes during pregnancy, but an uneasy feeling lingered. Then came an unexpected revelation. Laurel was tidying up Richard's study one afternoon. He had left in a rush, forgetting to lock the drawer where he kept his planner. At first, she only intended to straighten the desk, but the gleam of the planner's gold-edged pages caught her eye, as if beckoning her forward. She hesitated, torn between her respect for his privacy and a gnawing suspicion that something was terribly wrong. She finally picked it up, her heart pounding. As she flipped through, she recognized familiar entries, their wedding anniversary, her birthday, key business seminars. Then she landed on a page in late July, which was definitely her birthday month. She saw her own birthday listed, but in black ink this year, not gold. That alone was startling, because Richard had always noted her birthday in gold. A wave of disbelief crashed over her. Directly below the black ink of her birthday, with no space in between, was another name scribbled in gold: Vanessa Clark birthday. Laurel froze, feeling a surge of nausea that was only partly pregnancy-related. Who was Vanessa Clark? She scanned the surrounding weeks. There it was again, weekend trip with V in gold. Under appointments for dinner at exclusive restaurants, spa reservations, and even flight itineraries, the same name was etched in gold, overshadowing the black ink mentions of her own upcoming due date. Tears blurred her vision. She forced herself to read further. Some pages had little hearts drawn next to V, others had exclamation points. She noticed a pattern. Her own important dates had been replaced with scratchy black ink, pushed aside, while this, Vanessa's engagements, received the highlight of gold. Shaken to the core, she dropped the planner as if it were aflame. She couldn't fully process the betrayal, but her instincts screamed that she had unearthed something explosive. The man she believed cherished her was not only having an affair, but openly prioritizing someone else's birthday over hers in the very month she was due to give birth. And in the same color ink once reserved for her own special day. In that moment, Laurel understood her world would never be the same. Laurel tried to remain composed, but the turmoil inside her was overwhelming. She paced the living room, the planner resting on the table like a damning piece of evidence. As evening approached, her mind raced with questions. Should she confront Richard? Should she demand the truth, or wait to gather more information? In the end, she decided to be cautious. She called her closest friend, Caroline Summers, a confidant since college who lived just a few miles away. Over hushed tones on the phone, Laurel shared the discovery. Caroline gasped in horror, offering to drive over immediately, but Laurel insisted she was fine, at least physically. Emotionally, she felt like she was being torn apart by anger, sadness, and confusion. Caroline had heard rumors of high society affairs before it was almost a sport among the wealthy elite to whisper about extramarital liaisons. But she never imagined Richard would succumb to such a cliché. "Maybe it's just a misunderstanding," Caroline offered, her voice tinged with doubt. "He might be planning a surprise for you, or it could be some corporate contact." But they both knew the hearts and exclamation points in gold told a different story. That night, Laurel shared a tense dinner with Richard, who seemed lost in thought, barely noticing her reddened eyes. She wanted to scream at him, to throw the planner in his face, but fear kept her silent, fear that the confrontation might worsen her stress during pregnancy and harm the baby. So she swallowed her anger and decided to dig deeper. A few days later, she hired a discreet private investigator named Stephen Liu, recommended by a friend of Caroline's. Stephen specialized in spousal investigations and was known for his efficiency and utter discretion. Laurel provided him with the name Vanessa Clark, the known events from the planner, and the approximate times Richard claimed to be on business trips. In less than a week, Stephen returned with photographs and documents. Vanessa Clark, a striking brunette in her late 20s, was an aspiring model and social media influencer. She had a modest following, but was gaining traction thanks to her mysterious sponsor, a man who bankrolled her trips to Europe and her expensive photo shoots. The sponsor, the detective confirmed, was Richard Kensington. Laurel's heart sank as she flipped through the pictures. Richard and Vanessa at a private resort in Miami. Vanessa in the passenger seat of a sleek sports car with Richard at the wheel. Another shot showed them dining by candlelight at a Michelin-starred restaurant Richard had once promised to take Laurel to for her birthday. But the hardest photo to look at was the one with Vanessa wearing what appeared to be a diamond bracelet that Laurel herself had admired in a Cartier catalogue months before. In a matter of days, Laurel's worst fears had been confirmed. Richard wasn't just having a fling, he was leading a full-blown second life. He had replaced his pregnant wife's cherished place in his planner, and perhaps in his heart, with someone younger, captivating, and dangerously ambitious. Richard Kensington's social reputation was not built on business acumen alone. He was also known for hosting extravagant parties that attracted celebrities, politicians, and influential philanthropists. These events served as a prime networking platform, but also as a stage for Richard and Laurel to flaunt their seemingly perfect marriage. Since Laurel discovered the affair, she dreaded attending these functions. Her stomach, round with new life, felt increasingly heavy, both physically and emotionally. The upcoming gala was no exception. Organized to celebrate Richard's latest real estate victory, a chain of luxury condos in downtown Los Angeles, it promised to be a grand affair, complete with red carpets, paparazzi, and a 5-star catering service. Laurel had already decided to put on a brave face. In the swirl of flashing cameras and forced smiles, she would stand by Richard as though nothing were amiss. Perhaps, she reasoned, she could glean more information about his relationships or hear a careless whisper about Vanessa Clark. Caroline Summers accompanied her to the fitting for the gala gown, an elegant silk dress that concealed her baby bump in a flowing, glamorous style. But as she stood on the platform in front of a mirrored wall, Laurel felt hollow. Caroline tried to give her a pep talk, reminding her how strong she was. But any mention of strength only made Laurel wonder how she would survive the night, surrounded by people who might already suspect her husband's disloyalty. The night of the gala arrived. Under glittering chandeliers, Richard and Laurel made their entrance. Cameras clicked incessantly, capturing Laurel's gentle smile and Richard's proud posture. Guests congratulated them on the impending birth of their child, some even venturing to ask if they had settled on a name. Richard feigned delight, holding Laurel's hand or draping an arm around her waist for the perfect family portrait moment. But Laurel, seething inside, noted how quickly his hand would slip away once the cameras were pointed elsewhere. At one point, she heard a faint mention of Vanessa Clark from a group of younger attendees near the champagne fountain. Her senses sharpened, heart pounding. She edged closer, pretending to examine the floral arrangements. Fragments of conversation reached her ears. She's with a big-shot businessman. He's older, married. I think she was sporting a ridiculously big diamond bracelet. Laurel's stomach turned. Even here, among the city's elite, gossip about Vanessa and her sugar daddy was making rounds. She wanted to march over and ask them everything they knew, but it took every ounce of willpower to remain composed. Instead, she floated around the ballroom, exchanging pleasantries while scanning the crowd for any sign of the mistress herself. Though Vanessa Clark did not appear that evening, her presence was palpable in every hush, every glance that lingered just a moment too long on Laurel's growing belly. The tension was a silent, cunning snake, coiled in the corners, threatening to strike at any moment. Laurel left the gala with a deeper sense of dread, realizing that the rumor mill was in full swing and eventually it might devour her whole. In the following weeks, arguments between Laurel and Richard erupted over the smallest issues: what color to paint the nursery, whether to renovate their kitchen, or which baby shower invitations to send out. In truth, none of these details mattered to Laurel as much as the ache of betrayal. While she had not yet confronted him with the evidence, the constant tension weighed heavily on her heart and mind. One afternoon, as Laurel was resting in the sunroom, Richard appeared with brochures for luxury baby items. Instead of discussing them calmly, she snapped, "You seem to care more about images than reality. How about focusing on this family for once?" He was taken aback by her sharp tone, and a heated exchange followed. "What do you mean by that?" he asked, voice clipped, eyes narrowed. Laurel wanted to scream, to throw the damning photographs in his face. Instead, she tightened her jaw and said, "Nothing, just that I'm tired of feeling like an afterthought." Richard tried to shrug off her hostility, attributing it to pregnancy hormones, but beneath his dismissive exterior there was a glimmer of unease in his eyes. At night, lying in bed, Laurel struggled to find rest. She felt the baby shift in her womb, a reminder of the innocent life caught in this emotional tempest. A tear rolled down her cheek as she quietly whispered, "I'm so sorry," to the unborn child. She felt guilty for not providing a harmonious environment, worried about the stress coursing through her body. In these dark moments, she found fleeting comfort in talking with Caroline and her mother, Frances Crane. Both encouraged her to confront Richard and insist on counseling. But Laurel feared that a direct confrontation would trigger an emotional explosion. Or worse, Richard might take drastic legal measures to control the narrative if divorce was on the table. After all, with his wealth and influence, he could manipulate the press, intimidate lawyers, and undermine her credibility. Still, Laurel couldn't keep silent forever. Her resentment festered, fueled by the knowledge of Vanessa Clark's lavish lifestyle at Richard's expense. The mismatched duality in her life, on one hand, preparing for her baby's arrival, and on the other, grappling with marital betrayal, was tearing her apart. Desperate for clarity, she returned to Stephen Liu, the private investigator, asking him to focus on any recent interactions between Richard and Vanessa. Stephen obliged, presenting Laurel with more photographs and even recordings, phone calls in which Richard promised Vanessa a luxury condo in Beverly Hills once it was completed, hush-hush, credit card statements indicating extravagant purchases, and dinner reservations at exclusive restaurants right around the time Laurel was bedbound with morning sickness. The scale of Richard's deception weighed on Laurel like a heavy anchor. She began to wonder if she truly knew her husband at all. The kind man who once read poetry to her under starlit skies had transformed into a ruthless manipulator. And though she tried to rationalize his actions, blaming the corrupting nature of money and success, she couldn't deny that part of him had always craved more. More wealth, more power, more admiration, even if it meant sacrificing the person who had been there from the start. Vanessa Clark was no naive young woman led astray by a charming older millionaire. In her late 20s, she had already navigated the modeling and influencer circuit with a keen sense of ambition. She knew exactly what she wanted: fame, riches, and the prestige that came from being associated with someone of Richard Kensington's caliber. Over the months, Vanessa had posted subtle hints on her social media photographs at five-star resorts, cryptic captions about my generous mentor, and flashes of expensive jewelry that she never identified by name. For her growing fan base, she crafted a narrative of a self-made woman living a jet-set lifestyle. The real story was far more calculated. In private, Vanessa prodded Richard to buy her expensive gifts, to fund her travels, and to flaunt their relationship in exclusive circles. She constantly reminded him that she could easily find another sponsor if he proved too hesitant, and Richard, already enamored by her youth and boldness, complied with increasing willingness. Their romance had begun innocently enough. Vanessa was hired to model for one of Richard's luxury condo advertisements. Sparks flew, and soon one business lunch turned into a late dinner, which morphed into a clandestine trip out of state. That was nearly a year ago, around the time Laurel first became pregnant. Maybe it was the excitement of a forbidden liaison, or the intoxicating thrill of something new that kept Richard going back for more. Whatever the reason, he was now entwined with a woman who saw him as a stepping stone to a bigger life. For Vanessa, the pregnancy of Richard's wife was nothing but a complication. She bristled at the thought of his money being tied up in a child, or the possibility of Laurel overshadowing her in his heart. If anything, Vanessa saw Laurel's pregnancy as a reason to tighten her grip on Richard, ensuring he wouldn't back out for the sake of family. She even demanded that Richard promise to divorce Laurel after the baby was born. In her mind, her place in Richard's future needed to be secured, preferably with a legally binding commitment that guaranteed alimony or a massive payout should things go south. The demands continued to escalate. She wanted her birthday party to be a grand affair, overshadowing even Laurel's upcoming baby shower. But it never occurred to her that Richard had once reserved gold ink only for Laurel's birthday and their anniversary. For him to replace those precious dates with Vanessa's in that gleaming gold was a powerful symbol of how far he had strayed. Behind her polished smile, Vanessa was relentless. She pressured him to bring her to A-list events, to introduce her to film producers, to sign deals that would benefit her budding influencer career. And Richard, caught between the gravity of fatherhood and the seduction of Vanessa's world, found himself trapped. He no longer knew how to extricate himself without blowing up his marriage, losing credibility in business circles, and possibly facing a scandal that could cost him everything. So he kept feeding Vanessa's insatiable appetite for more, drifting further from the woman he had sworn to love and protect. Late one afternoon, Richard claimed he had back-to-back meetings at his downtown office. Laurel knew better. She discreetly tailed him in her car, heart racing. Was she really doing this? She'd never pictured herself as the kind of wife who trailed her husband like a detective, but her unborn child's future hung in the balance, and she needed answers. She followed him across town, struggling to keep a safe distance without losing him. After a few winding turns, his car pulled up to a chic boutique hotel. Laurel watched as he stepped out, glanced around as though checking for onlookers, then hurried inside. Minutes later, Vanessa Clark emerged from a taxi, wearing oversized sunglasses, her dark hair sweeping across her shoulders. She confidently strolled in the same direction. Laurel's breath caught in her throat. It was no mere business meeting. She felt a pang in her chest, a mixture of rage, humiliation, and heartbreak that almost knocked the air out of her. Despite her trembling hands, she remained in the car. Part of her wanted to storm into the hotel, confront them on the spot. Another part feared the repercussions. With a hand on her belly, she calmed herself, then texted Stephen Liu. He arrived within 30 minutes, a small camera in hand. From across the street they waited. After an hour, Richard and Vanessa stepped out together, looking comfortable in each other's company. Richard even leaned down to kiss her forehead. Stephen snapped several photos. Laurel's eyes burned with tears, but she forced herself not to look away. She needed this evidence, not just for any potential legal battles, but to confirm the truth her heart already knew. When the two parted ways, Vanessa sliding back into a taxi, Richard driving off in his luxury sedan, Laurel felt an overwhelming sadness. She thanked Stephen in a barely audible voice, then drove aimlessly for nearly an hour. She remembered the vows she and Richard had shared, his nervous laughter during their wedding speech, and how he had sworn to protect her from all harm. Those promises felt lifetimes away now. That night, she tried to confront him. "How was your meeting?" she asked, voice tense. He looked up from his phone, his expression guarded. "It was fine," he said tersely. They locked eyes for a moment. She searched his face for any sign of remorse, any flicker that suggested he might come clean. But he simply returned to checking his emails, as though the conversation was over. Laurel went to bed early, tears staining her pillow. She was done questioning her sanity. She was done giving him the benefit of the doubt. The photographs in her phone were proof of his disloyalty. They burned like embers in the quiet dark, urging her to make a move, yet she hesitated. Each time she felt fury surge within her, she pictured the baby's future caught in a bitter divorce, with a father who might vanish if pressed too hard. For the first time since her wedding day, Laurel found herself sleeping in the guest room. It was an emotional line in the sand, separating her from a man who refused to see the wreckage he was causing. Little did she know, events were already in motion that would force the truth into the open in the most public and humiliating way possible. As fate would have it, Vanessa Clark's birthday coincided painfully close to Laurel's. Richard had made elaborate plans for both, or so he thought. Laurel's birthday dinner, previously in gold ink for years, had been downgraded to a half-hearted dinner, WL scribbled in black. Meanwhile, the page for Vanessa's celebration sparkled with gold writing: V's B-Day, surprise party, Skyline Lounge. Laurel discovered these details in Richard's planner a second time, confirming that he was planning to attend Vanessa's party on the very weekend they'd normally celebrate Laurel's special day. In previous years, Richard would have whisked Laurel away to a luxury spa or some romantic getaway. But this year, all she got was a dinner reservation at a restaurant near their home, if it even happened at all. Furious but resolute, Laurel decided she would not spend her birthday alone. She rallied Caroline Summers and a few loyal friends, booking a private room at an upscale restaurant for her own celebration. It was a bold move, given her emotional state. But she refused to shrink into the shadows, pregnant or not. If Richard chose to attend his mistress's glittering event, let him. She would hold her head high and celebrate with people who genuinely cared for her. The night arrived. Laurel, glowing in a simple but elegant maternity dress, entered the private room with Caroline by her side. The table was filled with flowers, a small cake, and the warmth of friendship. Yet, every clink of cutlery against plates reminded her of what she had lost. She tried to engage in conversations about baby names and nursery decor, but the undercurrent of betrayal lingered, casting a shadow over the festivities. Around halfway through the meal, a latecomer arrived, Richard. He stood in the doorway, looking uncertain. Laurel's heart fluttered in confusion. Had he chosen her over Vanessa? He approached her, his face stiff with tension. "Happy birthday," he murmured, planting a quick kiss on her cheek. She nodded, mustering a polite smile. Laurel's friends eyed him with a mixture of suspicion and pity. Caroline's husband, Mark, shook Richard's hand, but gave him a look that said, "I know what you've done." The atmosphere was awkward, to say the least. After barely an hour of strained small talk, Richard excused himself to take a phone call. 30 minutes passed. He did not return. Concerned, Laurel stepped outside to find him. Instead, she discovered one of the restaurant staff informing her that Richard had left in a rush. He hadn't even bothered to say goodbye. Trying to maintain composure, Laurel rejoined her guests and pushed through the rest of the evening. But her mind was elsewhere, wondering where Richard had gone, even though she already knew. He was likely speeding across town to Vanessa's surprise party, leaving his pregnant wife behind on her birthday. A sense of finality crept over her. The chasm between them was now undeniable, and there would be no more illusions of a happy family life. A part of her wanted to cry, but another part felt strangely liberated. She had done all she could to salvage this relationship, and if he would rather be with his mistress, so be it. Laurel could not predict that the next few days would bring a revelation that would shock everyone, a twist that would make his betrayal look like child's play compared to the deeper secrets hidden in the gold ink of Richard's planner. Laurel spent the day after her birthday in a haze of disillusionment and quiet rage. She had accepted that Richard was likely with Vanessa for the remainder of the night, if not longer. The fact that he had left her pregnant and alone on her special day drove home just how broken their marriage had become. Early that evening, Laurel's phone buzzed. It was Stephen Liu, the private investigator, requesting an urgent meeting. Anxiety gnawed at her as she drove to his modest office in a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city. Over the past weeks, Stephen had been thorough yet respectful, never calling her in without cause. When she arrived, Stephen's expression told her everything. The news was significant. I looked deeper into Richard's financials, he began, opening a folder stuffed with documents. He's been funneling large sums into offshore accounts, some under Vanessa's name, but others under a different alias, Regina Caldwell. Laurel's brow furrowed. Who was Regina Caldwell? Another mistress? Another business partner? Stephen shook his head, leaning forward. That's the twist. Regina Caldwell appears to be an older woman in her 60s, living in upstate New York. No clear connection to modeling or real estate. But here's the kicker. A birth certificate tied to that name suggests that Regina Caldwell is actually an alias for none other than Richard's biological mother. Laurel felt her stomach drop. She knew Richard's mother had died when he was young, or so he had always claimed. Are you sure? She asked, her voice cracking. Stephen nodded. I traced it back. Richard's mother is alive, living under a different name. He's been sending her monthly deposits for years, basically paying her to keep quiet. But about what? That's what I've been trying to figure out. He laid out more papers, old newspaper clippings from Philadelphia about a mysterious disappearance, property deeds that changed hands abruptly. The puzzle pieces pointed to one disturbing conclusion. Richard's mother had been involved in some sort of legal battle or scandal many years ago, something big enough that she relocated under an assumed identity. Laurel stared at the evidence, mind reeling. If Richard had lied about his mother's death, what else had he lied about? And how did Vanessa Clark fit into this? Stephen then showed her a recent phone record, a conference call Richard had made to a high-powered law firm in Manhattan. It seems he's making arrangements, Stephen said carefully, possibly to rewrite his will or create new trusts. If these go through, Laurel, he could be setting up funds that bypass you and the child, funneling everything to Vanessa or even to his mother. Laurel's pulse hammered in her ears. Everything she had believed about Richard, that he was a self-made man, that he had lost his mother tragically, was crumbling. She realized with horror that if he was manipulating his estate, he could strip her and the baby of financial security, leaving them with nothing. Even with the prenup they had signed, the scale of his betrayal could leave her at a significant disadvantage. Tears sprang to her eyes, but an unfamiliar resolve also took root in her heart. She couldn't let him destroy her child's future, no matter how painful, how humiliating. She had to stand up to him, secrets or not. She wouldn't let him bury her under a mountain of lies. Laurel returned home that evening, the evidence from Stephen Liu heavy in her bag. She found Richard in his study, scribbling in his leather-bound planner, no doubt updating some new scheme in black or gold ink. He didn't look up as she entered. Richard, she began, voice quivering but determined. We need to talk. He turned to her with a slight scowl, as though annoyed by the interruption. Can it wait? I'm in the middle of something important. So am I, she shot back. Her boldness caught him off guard. He closed his planner and leaned back in his chair, eyebrows lifted in surprise. Laurel took a deep breath. I know about Vanessa Clark. I know you've been lying to me for months." Her words rang in the silent room, forcing Richard to face the inescapable. "And I know you've been funneling money to someone named Regina Caldwell, someone you claim is your dead mother." Richard's face went deathly pale. For a brief moment he stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. Then he gathered himself, anger flooding his features. "You had me investigated." His voice was low, trembling with fury. "You had no right. I have every right." Laurel shot back, eyes brimming with tears. "You replaced me on your calendar with another woman's birthday in gold ink. You've put our child's future at risk." "Don't tell me about rights." She threw down the stack of evidence on the desk, photographs and documents spilling out. Richard stared at them, his nostrils flaring. "You have no idea what you're getting into," he hissed. "You think you can just ruin everything I've built, everything you've built?" Laurel repeated, aghast. "We built this life together. I stood by you. I supported you when no one else would. And this is how you repay me." She motioned to the incriminating photographs. "You throw everything away for a fling with an opportunist, and then you lie about your mother." He pressed a hand over his eyes, looking suddenly exhausted. "It's complicated," he muttered, voice strained. "Vanessa, it started as a mistake, then it just spiraled. I never intended to hurt you." He glanced at the documents referring to Regina Caldwell. "As for my mother, I had reasons to cut her out of my life. She was dangerous to me, to my reputation. I told everyone she died so no one would ask questions." Laurel scoffed at his self-centeredness. "Your reputation. That's all you ever care about." Richard's anger flared again. "Don't act like you're some saint. You benefited from my success too. You lived in luxury, never wanting for anything." She felt the sting of his words but refused to be intimidated. "Yes, I loved our life, but I loved you more. And that man I loved is gone, replaced by someone I don't recognize. Someone who would toss his pregnant wife aside for a mistress, then hide money offshore while rewriting his will." Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. Somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed, marking the relentless march of time. Richard slumped in his chair, eyes darting as though calculating his next move. Laurel, standing strong, finally realized that the man before her was not the romantic husband she once idolized, but a stranger guided by greed and secrets. She turned on her heel and walked out, leaving him amid the scattered evidence and his empty justifications. A single thought pulsed through her mind. Everything was about to change, and there was no going back. The confrontation triggered a domino effect. Laurel wasted no time consulting a lawyer, John Harrington, a family friend known for his strategic brilliance in court. When she showed him the evidence of Richard's affair, the secret accounts, and his attempts to sideline her financially, John's eyes lit with determination. He promised her that, if it came to divorce, they had more than enough ammunition to ensure she and the baby would be protected. Meanwhile, word about Richard's secret life began circulating among the tight-knit circles of wealthy investors and philanthropists. No one knew the full story, but fragments leaked whispers of an affair, misappropriated funds, and shady dealings. Clients started pulling out of negotiations for fear of being caught in the crossfire of scandal. Richard's real estate empire began to tremble. Deals that were once assured halted abruptly, casting doubt on his entire portfolio. As if that weren't enough, one of his key business associates, Jacob Moore, confronted him about rumors of offshore accounts. Jacob had built his reputation on transparency and wanted no association with a partner who might be involved in potential fraud. Richard tried to downplay the allegations, but in the world of high finance, mere rumors could sink a career. Soon, Jacob Moore severed ties publicly, leading others to do the same. Investors demanded explanations that Richard could not provide without incriminating himself. Vanessa Clark sensed the shifting winds. She noticed fewer gifts arriving, fewer lavish dinners. The generous mentor, who had once showered her with gold and diamonds, was now too busy fighting off business collapses and personal disgrace to cater to her whims. Frustrated, she threatened to go to the tabloids to sell her story of how Richard Kensington had wooed her with promises of marriage and wealth. She demanded hush money to keep quiet. This only further drained Richard's liquidity. His attorneys scrambled to keep Vanessa at bay while also handling the legal wrangling that was sure to come from Laurel. The man who once seemed unstoppable was now desperately juggling the fallout of his own deeds. At nights, he sat alone in his study, the leather-bound planner open to blank pages, no more glowing gold ink marking triumphant future events. It was as though his life had been stripped of color, leaving him with nothing but bleak prospects. Laurel, meanwhile, found unexpected allies. Old friends from Philadelphia reached out, offering emotional and even financial support if needed. Caroline Summers helped line up babysitting services and a circle of support for the upcoming birth. Frances Crane, Laurel's mother, flew in from her retirement home to stay by Laurel's side, ensuring she never felt alone. While the betrayal still hurt, Laurel discovered a new wellspring of inner strength. She refused to be the downtrodden wife society might expect her to be. As her due date approached, she busied herself preparing for the baby, transforming a spare bedroom into a cozy nursery, lined with soft pastel colors and whimsical artwork. Despite her marriage crumbling, she found hope in the life she was about to bring into the world. And while Richard scrambled to save his empire, Laurel made peace with the notion that her child's father might not be the steadfast family man she'd once believed him to be. Laurel's contractions started one muggy afternoon in late August. She had just returned from a prenatal checkup when she felt the first pang of labor. Gripped by a wave of simultaneous fear and excitement, she called Caroline, who rushed her to the hospital. The doctors confirmed that the baby was on its way, and Laurel was prepped for delivery. During the stressful hours that followed, she couldn't help but wonder if Richard would appear. Despite everything, he was still the child's father. Word reached Richard through a family friend, and eventually he did turn up at the hospital, face drawn and eyes bloodshot. He hovered by the waiting room, uncertain if Laurel would allow him in the delivery room. Laurel, needing to focus on the momentous task of giving birth, decided that her own well-being and that of her child mattered most. She granted him entry, but made it clear they would discuss nothing of their marital issues until after the baby was safely born. What should have been a beautiful, if painful moment was tinged with emotional turmoil. Richard held Laurel's hand, tears glistening in his eyes as their child finally entered the world, a baby girl, her cries filling the sterile room with new life. "She's beautiful," Laurel whispered, overwhelmed by love. In that fleeting instant, something in Richard's expression seemed to crack. Whether it was remorse or genuine happiness, Laurel couldn't be sure, but the euphoria of the birth was soon overshadowed by a shocking twist. As Laurel recuperated, Richard stepped outside to make a phone call. He never returned. Hours passed, and when Caroline went to check, she found that Richard had vanished. The next morning, a news report surfaced. Richard Kensington had been detained by authorities for questioning related to financial fraud, specifically concerning offshore accounts and tax evasion. Laurel's head spun. Everything was happening too fast. She clutched her newborn daughter, tears streaming down her face. Even in this moment of joy, Richard's actions overshadowed what should have been a peaceful time of bonding. Word spread quickly, and soon paparazzi were camped outside the hospital, hungry for photos of the new mother and the sensational downfall of her millionaire husband. It turned out that someone, likely Vanessa Clark, had leaked financial records to a rival real estate firm, which promptly handed them to the authorities in exchange for immunity. The leaked documents showed a complex web of shell companies tied to Richard's name, along with possible bribes to local officials to expedite construction permits. With multiple allegations piling up, law enforcement acted swiftly. Laurel now faced a complicated path forward. She was a new mother, physically and emotionally drained, yet her life was thrust under a microscope of legal scrutiny. She had to make tough choices about custody, finances, and whether to file for immediate divorce, all while figuring out how to nurture this innocent new life in her arms. As she gazed down at her sleeping daughter, whom she named Lily Laurel, silently vowed that no matter the chaos swirling around them, she would protect her child at all costs. And she would never again allow Richard or any man to control her destiny through a gilded illusion of love. The weeks that followed Lily's birth were a whirlwind of media attention and legal battles. Laurel, still recovering, found herself on the front page of tabloids, next to headlines like Millionaire Mogul's Secret Mistress Exposed and Scandal Rock's Kensington Real Estate. Paparazzi camped outside her home, hoping to catch a glimpse of the new mother. Some unscrupulous reporters even tried to sneak into the hospital where Lily had her postnatal checkups. Caroline Summers became Laurel's de facto spokesperson. Shielding her from the worst of the media frenzy, Caroline offered vague updates, insisting that Laurel and baby Lily were doing fine and would not be commenting on Richard's legal troubles. Behind the scenes, Laurel was locked in discussions with her lawyer, John Harrington, about how to protect her assets and secure child support for Lily. To add another layer of stress, Vanessa Clark emerged with a salacious interview in a tabloid magazine. She claimed that Richard had promised her the world, including marriage, expensive properties, and a luxury lifestyle. She insisted she was as much a victim as Laurel, painting herself as a misunderstood woman who had fallen for a powerful man's lies. Laurel snorted in disbelief when she read the article, recognizing Vanessa's manipulative streak. Vanessa wasn't a naive victim. She'd actively lured Richard deeper into the affair, leveraging his vulnerabilities for her own gain. At the same time, Richard languished under house arrest at his Beverly Hills mansion, awaiting trial. His assets were largely frozen, and many of his business partners refused to return his calls. Once revered as a visionary real estate developer, he was now seen as a cautionary tale. He reached out to Laurel multiple times, begging for forgiveness and pleading that they stand together as a family. He insisted that if she publicly supported him, it would help mitigate the fallout from his financial wrongdoings, but Laurel was done sacrificing herself. Any love she had once held for Richard was drowned out by the memory of him leaving her hospital room to be arrested, by the images of Vanessa flaunting diamond bracelets meant for Laurel. Her main priority now was Lily ensuring her daughter was healthy, safe, and raised with integrity. With John Harrington's help, Laurel filed for legal separation, requesting full custody of Lily. Though the process would take time, she had a strong case. Richard's affair and alleged financial improprieties painted him as an unstable figure. She made it clear that if he wanted any role in Lily's life, he needed to sort out his legal issues and prove he could be a fit father. Otherwise, the courts would have no trouble granting Laurel's request. Meanwhile, Laurel leaned on her support network, which expanded surprisingly. Old college friends, even distant relatives, sent gifts and messages of encouragement. Some who once envied Laurel's lavish life began to admire her resilience. The public narrative slowly shifted from pitying her to respecting her strength. She also found a new sense of purpose in motherhood, the serene bond she formed with Lily, offering a counterpoint to the chaos swirling outside. One day, as Laurel was rocking Lily to sleep, she remembered a conversation she had with Richard years ago, long before the millions and the scandal. Back then, he had joked that money was just ink on a check, whereas true wealth was ink written on your heart. Laurel felt a bitter twist of irony now. Richard's golden ink had once symbolized love and commitment, but eventually it became the sign of his ultimate betrayal. Yet here, in her arms, was Lily proof that even from the darkest chapters, something pure and hopeful can emerge. In the months that followed, Richard went to court. The trial was a media circus. Vanessa Clark testified under oath, distancing herself from any criminal wrongdoing while admitting that she had been aware of certain questionable transactions. Family secrets about Richard's mother, Regina Caldwell, also came to light. She herself testified through a deposition, revealing that she and Richard had faked her death to evade creditors from years past. The entire fiasco painted a portrait of a man who climbed social and financial ladders by weaving intricate lies, some out of desperation, others out of sheer ambition. In the end, Richard was found guilty of multiple counts of tax fraud and sentenced to several years in federal prison. The judge acknowledged that Richard had cooperated to some extent, but the scale of his deceit was too large for leniency. When the verdict was read, he slumped forward, face ashen, as though the weight of his world had finally crushed him. Laurel watched the live feed of the sentencing from home, Lily cooing softly at her side. She felt a complicated mix of relief, sadness, and resolve. It was a tragic end to what had once been a love story, but also a new beginning for her and her daughter. The illusions were shattered, replaced by the real possibility of building a stable life on her own terms. With her divorce eventually finalized, Laurel received a portion of Richard's estate, enough to ensure Lily would never want for anything. Though she bore the stigma of a high-profile scandal, she also garnered respect for how she handled the ordeal with dignity, no sensational tell-all interviews, and a steadfast focus on her child. She continued to work with charitable foundations she had once championed alongside Richard, but now she did so under her own name, forging her own path. Caroline Summers remained her closest ally. Together, they embarked on new ventures, Laurel investing in a small chain of boutique maternity stores, Caroline offering marketing expertise. Whenever doubt crept in, Laurel reminded herself how far she had come, from the shattered illusions of a grand marriage to the fulfillment of a life guided by honesty and unconditional love for her daughter. And so ended the saga of gold ink and heartbreak, of a millionaire's reckless disregard for the very vows he had once made. In its wake, Laurel Kensington rose from the wreckage, stronger, wiser, and determined to give Lily the childhood free from the deceptions that had nearly consumed them all. In the end, the golden ink that once marked Richard Kensington's precious milestones became the symbol of his greatest undoing. A single, glittering oversight on a calendar revealed more than just an affair. It exposed a life built on fragile lies and hidden agendas. For Laurel, it was the catalyst she needed to break free from the shadows of deceit and carve a path of independence for herself and her daughter, Lily. This story reminds us that the truth, no matter how painful, holds the power to set us free. Secrets may temporarily shine like gold, but when exposed to the light, they lose their luster, revealing the darker realities beneath. Thank you for joining me on this journey through heartbreak, betrayal, and ultimately, renewal. If you found this story captivating, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Your support helps bring more stories to life. Stay tuned for the next dramatic tale. Pregnant wife sold one painting. The millionaire and mistress didn't know it held their secrets. Rain pattered against the window as Charlotte pressed her hand against her growing belly, her eyes drifting toward the single painting she cherished most, a mysterious portrait whose value she never truly understood. In the dim glow of the evening light, the image captured both her hopes and her regrets. Little did she know that she was about to set in motion a chain of events far more explosive than she ever could have imagined. By selling that painting to ease her mounting financial burdens, Charlotte would unlock long-buried secrets of a powerful millionaire and his alluring mistress. The consequences would soon be impossible to escape. Charlotte Armstrong had never felt more alone. She was pregnant 5 months along, and, despite the excitement that a new life often brought, she had lost the warmth and security of a nurturing home. The once beautiful house she shared with her husband, Leonard Aston, was now cold and unwelcoming. The echoes of their arguments bounced off the walls, lingering in the corners where love used to reside. Leonard, a man of 42, had come from modest beginnings, but had ascended in social circles with tenacity and intelligence. He was the type of person who, upon entering a room, commanded attention through his quiet confidence. When Charlotte first met him at a charity gala for the Holloway Foundation, hosted to help underprivileged children, she had been struck by his stoic nature. She saw a lonely soul behind his poised demeanor and believed she could soften the edges of his heart. And for a time she did. That night, he had delivered a rousing speech about philanthropy, citing personal inspirations such as the late Theodore Jacobs, an obscure painter who once dedicated his craft to support orphans in impoverished regions. It had warmed Charlotte's heart, and in their conversation afterward, she discovered that Leonard had grown up in foster care, harboring deep empathy for struggling families. She had admired him for that, for wanting to improve the lives of others in ways he was never afforded. Yet as Leonard's business ventures soared, particularly after he formed a lucrative partnership with technology mogul Damian Wood, his philanthropic spirit took a backseat to relentless ambition. Late-night phone calls, undisclosed business trips, and countless secret meetings became more frequent. Charlotte, naive at first, interpreted his distance as the price of success. She did not fathom the emotional chasms that would soon separate them, or the possibility that she was not the only woman in his life. Charlotte's personal finances suffered because she was no longer receiving the loving attention nor the financial support she once did from Leonard. This left her feeling stranded. Her close friend, Kathleen Gray, had tried to help her with small loans and counsel, but Charlotte refused to rely on charity from a friend. Her pride simply wouldn't allow it. All the while, the monthly expenses kept piling up: hospital bills for prenatal checkups, house mortgage payments, and more. The new life she carried inside her felt more like an anchor pulling her downward into a sea of debt and despair. Leonard's retreat into secrecy reached its breaking point the day he returned from a supposed conference in Paris. Charlotte, who had meticulously prepared a candlelit dinner to share an ultrasound image with him, watched in dismay as he paid no attention to the meal or the photograph. Over dinner, he picked at his food and mumbled about business deals. She observed that he seemed drawn inward, distant in his own thoughts. When she inquired about the conference, his half-hearted replies reeked of evasion. He ended the conversation by leaving the table early and disappearing into his study, door locked behind him. Weary, Charlotte gently placed the ultrasound printout on the dining room table. A single tear escaped her eye and smudged the tiny black and white image, which she had cradled in excitement for weeks. If only she had known how to reach him again, to reconnect with the man who once held her so tenderly, but that man seemed to have vanished. In the corner of the living room hung a painting that had been in Charlotte's family for generations, a portrait of a young woman with haunting green eyes, her expression shimmering with both sorrow and unspoken defiance. Charlotte's late grandmother, Isadora Baird, had once told her that the painter was none other than Theodore Jacobs, the philanthropic artist Leonard had mentioned long ago. According to family law, Jacobs had embedded cryptic symbols into certain paintings, which were rumored to conceal letters, diaries, and occasionally secrets about powerful families who had commissioned him. Growing up, Charlotte never fully believed the rumors, though she cherished the painting for sentimental reasons. Her grandmother had insisted that if ever Charlotte found herself in dire financial need, she should sell this heirloom. So Charlotte left it hanging on the wall, hoping she would never have to part with it. But times had changed drastically. She could feel the weight of her grandmother's words more than ever. One afternoon, while Leonard was in another of his mysterious business meetings, Charlotte received a call from her bank. Her checking account was nearly overdrawn without immediate payments. She would risk eviction or loss of property. Stepping into the living room, she ran her fingers along the frame of the painting, reflecting on its family history. She had no other valuable possessions. Her jewelry collection was modest. The furniture was mostly bought on Leonard's dime. Only this painting, if its rumored authenticity could be confirmed, might fetch a significant sum. Tears welled in her eyes. Letting go of the painting meant closing a chapter of her family's legacy, but desperation overshadowed nostalgia. She reluctantly resolved to contact an appraiser. Charlotte scoured the internet for reputable art appraisers and landed upon the name Miriam Hawkins, a specialist in 19th century and early 20th century paintings. Hawkins was widely acknowledged for her discerning eye in attributing works to lesser-known artists, especially if the pieces had philanthropic backstories or intriguing provenances. Upon reaching out, Charlotte was surprised at how quickly Miriam responded. The appraiser, in a polite yet eager tone, agreed to visit Charlotte's home the next day. When Miriam arrived, she emanated a calm assuredness that helped Charlotte quell her nerves. The appraiser's gaze swept across the living room until it came to rest on the painting of the woman with green eyes. She approached with almost reverent steps. After donning a pair of white gloves, Miriam carefully removed the piece from the wall and placed it on a table for closer inspection. "Astounding," Miriam murmured, her voice trembling with excitement. The signature in the corner, although partially obscured, matched the style and brushwork associated with Theodore Jacobs. "I can confirm this is an authentic Jacobs painting, but let me look closer." As she examined the edges of the frame and the backside of the canvas, a puzzlement crossed her features. Charlotte noticed but didn't speak, afraid of breaking Miriam's concentration. The older woman pinched her lips into a thin line, her hands delicately tracing the edges of the painting, as though it held a secret compartment. Then she paused. "This is quite extraordinary," Miriam said, leaning back and looking at Charlotte. "It's known that Jacobs sometimes inserted letters or hidden writings between the canvas and its backing. I can't be certain if it's the case here, but there's a slight irregularity in the thickness. I'd need permission to remove the backing to confirm." Charlotte hesitated. The painting was precious, and any damage, physical or otherwise, would reduce its value, but her curiosity overcame her apprehension. She nodded. Miriam smiled reassuringly. With gentle care, she began loosening the nails that held the frame's backing in place. As each nail came free, Charlotte's heartbeat quickened. Slowly, Miriam lifted the frame's backing. A folded parchment, crisp around the edges, slipped onto the table. They both paused, eyes wide. Miriam reached for the document, but Charlotte stopped her hand. She took a deep breath, then picked up the folded parchment herself. Carefully, she opened it. Written in swirling cursive script were names, numbers, and references to transactions involving an entity called Hargrave and Sons. Lines of coded text also appeared, something that looked like a ledger detailing massive sums of money transferring between unidentified accounts. At the bottom, a signature, Theodore Jacobs. "What is this?" Charlotte whispered, her voice shaking. Miriam exhaled slowly. "I have no idea, but it looks like a record of financial dealings or secrets connected to someone from that era. The mention of Hargrave and Sons is interesting. That was an old banking firm rumored to handle discreet transactions for wealthy patrons. If Jacobs recorded it, he must have been aware of something significant and potentially scandalous about the painting's commissioners. Charlotte's mind spun. Could these documents be valuable, or worse, dangerous? Her curiosity was overshadowed by an urgent thought. She needed money. The painting alone, authenticated, would fetch a hefty price. Add to it the intrigue of a hidden parchment, and the piece's value might skyrocket. Miriam confirmed that interest among collectors for Jacobs's hidden writings was at an all-time high. Yet the question gnawed at her. Could these hidden records bear any relevance to her present life? Why did her grandmother insist on keeping the painting? She had always brushed it off as mere family lore. Now, she wasn't so certain. After discussing the painting's approximate value easily enough to cover Charlotte's debts and hospital expenses, with a significant surplus, she and Miriam scheduled a formal appraisal event at an upcoming auction house in the city. Miriam left, promising to handle the auction process. Charlotte stood by the table, painting in one hand, hidden parchment in the other. She hoped she was making the right decision. The auction was to be held at a prestigious house known for dealing in rare collectibles and valuables, Rutherford and Company. The day of the event, Charlotte arrived feeling both anxious and excited. She wore a simple black dress, her baby bump more evident than ever. At her side was Kathleen Gray, who refused to let her friend face this monumental moment alone. Inside the opulent lobby, Charlotte noticed a swirl of well-dressed individuals examining different pieces. Mingling among them were wealthy socialites and art aficionados, eager to catch a glimpse of rumored rarities. The Jacobs painting, with its hidden parchment, had created buzz before even reaching the auction block. Journalists and bloggers whispered about it, snapping pictures from afar. Charlotte felt a renewed wave of nervousness. She tried to remember she was doing this for the financial security of her unborn child. Before the proceedings began, Miriam Hawkins introduced Charlotte to a few potential buyers. One was a reserved yet authoritative woman named Helena March, an international collector with a penchant for philanthropic-themed art. Another was Mr. Oliver Grant, a prominent figure in the shipping industry with a rumored interest in 19th-century conspiracy-laden works. And then, at the last minute, someone else arrived, an elegant woman with dark hair, dressed in a sleek burgundy gown. Her name tag read, Amelia Delacroix. Charlotte couldn't explain it, but something about Amelia's demeanor made her uneasy. The woman circled around the painting, her eyes studying it in a calculating way. She inquired with Miriam about the hidden parchment, a note of tension in her otherwise silky, smooth voice. Amelia then noticed Charlotte from across the room, smiled ever so slightly, and walked away. Charlotte shivered. She had never seen this woman before, yet the encounter left her unsettled. Moments later, the auction began. The Jacobs painting came up for bid within the first hour. The auctioneer, regally dressed in a tailored suit, introduced the piece and highlighted its unique story: a hidden parchment, a philanthropic painter, rumored secrets. The opening bid soared far above the initial estimates. The room seemed captivated, paddles rising at an astonishing rate. Charlotte looked to Kathleen, heart pounding. Suddenly, Amelia Delacroix joined the bidding. Each time another buyer raised the price, Amelia countered without hesitation, her eyes locked on the painting. After a fierce battle, Amelia's final bid, so large it made Charlotte's knees tremble, silenced the room. The auctioneer's gavel struck down. Sold to Miss Amelia Delacroix. Charlotte was flush with relief and astonishment. The painting, along with its hidden secret, had garnered a sum beyond her wildest dreams. Enough to clear all debts, secure a future for her child, and maybe even start anew. She couldn't believe it. Kathleen hugged her tightly. Yet, beneath that momentary euphoria, an undercurrent of dread flowed. Why did Amelia Delacroix want the painting so badly? And who exactly was she? The day after the auction, Charlotte's phone rang incessantly. Journalists wanted statements, bloggers clamored for an exclusive interview, and collectors extended invitations to dinner or cocktails, possibly hoping to glean more inside information. Overwhelmed, she let most calls go to voicemail. Financial relief was within grasp, but she was in no mood for the spotlight. By afternoon, she received a single text message that made her heart skip a beat. "We need to talk. Leonard is in trouble." Amelia Delacroix had her number. Panic surged through Charlotte. How did Amelia know Leonard? And why on earth would this woman, who had just purchased her family's painting, suggest something ominous about her husband? Her hands trembled as she typed a reply. Why? How do you know Leonard? Amelia responded with an address to a discreet cafe and a time, 3:00 p.m. that afternoon. No further explanation. Charlotte was torn between caution and curiosity. She weighed the risk of ignoring it, but something told her that Amelia Delacroix held important information. Maybe it had to do with the painting's hidden parchment. Maybe it involved the secrets Jacobs had documented. And then there was Leonard's own suspicious behavior. Despite her better judgment, she decided to meet Amelia. The cafe was tucked away in a quaint historic district of the city. With her heart racing, Charlotte walked in exactly at 3:00 p.m. The interior smelled of freshly ground coffee beans and honey pastries. She spotted Amelia seated at a corner table by a large window, dressed now in a simple black blouse and slim skirt, projecting understated elegance. A mysterious tension clung to her like perfume. Charlotte approached cautiously. Amelia gestured for her to sit. They regarded each other in silence for a moment, before Amelia broke it with a direct statement. Leonard and I have been involved for over a year. Time seemed to slow, leaving Charlotte breathless. She felt a sharp pain pierce her chest, though part of her had suspected an affair. Tears threatened to surface, but she clenched her fists beneath the table. She couldn't let Amelia see her crumble. Amelia continued, her tone unwavering. He told me he was unhappy, that you and he had grown distant. He also implied you two had separated. I only learned a month ago that you're still married. And then I discovered you're pregnant. Does Leonard know I'm pregnant? Charlotte asked in a shaking voice, anger and hurt swirling within her. She had told Leonard numerous times, but did he pay attention? Yes, Amelia replied, her eyes flickering with discomfort. He knew. He told me he didn't want children, at least not right now. He said it was a mistake, an accident. Charlotte felt a fresh wave of heartbreak. So that was how Leonard saw the baby. A mistake. She bit back sobs, choosing to channel her pain into quiet resolve. I asked you here because of the painting, Amelia said, producing a black folder from her handbag. The hidden parchment might be connected to something bigger. Leonard's finances are complicated. I've seen certain documents in his office that reference shell companies, questionable partners, and a hush fund. Charlotte's eyes widened. A hush fund? Amelia nodded, her gaze earnest. I can't pretend I'm innocent. My relationship with Leonard began as purely physical, an affair. But I started caring for him, for the man beneath the ruthless entrepreneur facade. A month ago, I uncovered a set of files in his desk. They mention Hargrave and Sons. The same name was on the hidden parchment, right? Charlotte felt the memory strike her like a bolt. Yes, the hidden parchment indeed mentioned Hargrave and Sons, a banking firm from decades ago. That's impossible, she said, shaking her head. Hargrave and Sons shut down generations ago. It was associated with wealthy families from a bygone era. Why would Leonard be involved with them now? I wish I knew, Amelia replied. But the painting and the parchment are connected to Leonard's secrets. That's why I wanted it. I thought it might reveal what he's hiding and how I fit into it. Charlotte realized, then and there, she'd stepped into a world of intrigue far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Her unborn child's future hung in the balance. She needed answers. And somehow, it seemed, the painting she'd just sold and the woman who bought it were the keys to unraveling Leonard's tangled web of deception. Later that evening, Charlotte confronted Leonard as he returned home. Standing in the living room, arms folded protectively over her belly, she demanded an explanation. Tell me about Hargrave and Sons, she said, voice trembling. Tell me about Amelia Delacroix. Leonard's face fell into a mask of shock and then quickly hardened into anger. How do you know that name? And what does Amelia have to do with you? Charlotte swallowed. I sold the painting. The buyer was Amelia. She told me about you too. Everything. Leonard swore under his breath, his emotions churning just beneath the surface. For a brief second, Charlotte saw shame flicker in his eyes, but it vanished too quickly. He placed his briefcase on the table and ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. "I'm sorry," he said in a clipped tone. "I never meant to hurt you." Charlotte waited, arms still folded. Leonard continued, "Amelia was supposed to be a temporary distraction, but I didn't want to leave you, not until I figured out how to stabilize the business. Things have been complicated." "My partnerships aren't as straightforward as you think." She pressed him. "Complicated how? Does it have to do with the hush fund Amelia mentioned?" Leonard froze, every line in his posture screaming tension. "I see she's been telling you quite a bit." He swallowed hard, stepping closer, voice dropping. "Look, everything I'm doing, this entire charade, is for a greater good. The hush fund is for certain, deals that I've made with international investors. If word leaks, it could cost me everything. Our house, the business, my reputation, and it might cost you too." "Me?" Charlotte echoed, feeling genuine alarm. He nodded grimly. "They know I have a wife. They know I have a child on the way. If I fail to deliver on these deals, there could be serious consequences. These men don't operate within the confines of the law. They can be ruthless." Tears burned behind Charlotte's eyes. "Why didn't you tell me? Why have you kept me in the dark?" Leonard's shoulders slumped, as though momentarily stripped of his bravado. "I didn't know how. And I thought by having Amelia on my side, I could negotiate with them more effectively. She has connections I needed, but it got out of hand. I'm sorry." She wanted to scream, to rage at him for his betrayal. Instead, she forced herself to think about the bigger picture. "So you're saying we're in danger?" He nodded, pained. "Potentially, yes. If the secrets behind Hargrave and Sons, whatever Amelia is chasing, fall into the wrong hands, it might threaten powerful people who won't hesitate to remove threats." Charlotte stared at him. Her sense of betrayal, humiliation, and fear merged into a single knot in her chest. Protecting her unborn child now took precedence over everything. She realized that the painting, the one lifeline she had, was no longer in her possession, but the hidden parchment still existed. Miriam Hawkins had scanned a digital copy of it for archival and appraisal records. Perhaps that was the crucial piece. Without another word, Charlotte turned and walked away, heading upstairs to her bedroom, leaving Leonard alone with the weight of his confession. This was only the beginning. As the complexities mounted, Charlotte found solace in her trusted friend Kathleen Gray. They met in Kathleen's cozy apartment overlooking a small lake. The reflection of sunlight off the water brought a temporary calm to Charlotte's turmoil. Charlotte recounted everything: the painting sale, Amelia's revelations, Leonard's partial confession. Kathleen listened intently, her face shifting from shock to anger to concern. Finally, she sipped her tea, eyes narrowed. "I need to be honest with you, Char," Kathleen said. "I wasn't just helping you because you're my friend. I was helping because I suspected Leonard was entangled in something dangerous. I've had my own run-ins with people from that realm." Charlotte frowned. "What do you mean?" Kathleen sighed, setting her cup down. "Remember last year, when I disappeared for a few weeks and said I was visiting family out of state? That was only part of the truth. I had been subpoenaed as a witness in a financial scandal that involved a friend of mine, Tyler Hughes. He had dealings with foreign investors and a shady banking network that turned out to have historical ties to Hargrave and Sons. They used a labyrinth of shell companies to launder money." Charlotte's breath caught in her throat. "Are you serious? So Hargrave and Sons isn't defunct?" She nodded. "Legally, it ceased operations generations ago, but an underground version still thrives, operated by unscrupulous descendants of the original bankers. They handle enormous sums for a variety of clients, some legitimate, some not. Tyler discovered this too late, and he paid the price. He's in federal prison, a cold dread coiled in Charlotte's stomach. The name that appeared in Jacobs's hidden parchment was likely an early iteration of this same corrupt banking network. The more she learned, the more it dawned on her that Leonard might be in way over his head. Kathleen patted Charlotte's knee. "You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out. But you have to be prepared for the possibility that Leonard's predicament is bigger than just an affair or a business dispute." Charlotte nodded, her voice trembling. "I need to protect my baby." She and Kathleen devised a plan, gather more information, ascertain how far Leonard had fallen into the quagmire of Hargrave and Sons. If necessary, they would go to the authorities. The biggest missing piece was the content of the hidden parchment, which might hold clues that could unravel the labyrinth of secrets. Charlotte arranged a meeting with Miriam Hawkins at Rutherford and Company, hoping to obtain the digital scans of the parchment. Miriam welcomed her warmly in her private office. After some small talk, she handed Charlotte an envelope containing a USB drive. "These are high-resolution scans," Miriam said. "You'll see that the ledger references multiple transactions. I also discovered some personal notes scribbled in the margins by Theodore Jacobs. It seems he was approached by the commissioner of the painting to hide or document these transaction ledgers, possibly to blackmail them in the future. But Jacobs had a conscience. He references a family that was wronged, though the details are murky." Charlotte thanked Miriam, her heart pounding with anticipation. She walked out into the daylight, envelope clutched tightly. If she could decode Jacobs's scribbled notes, maybe she could find a path out of this nightmare. Before she could leave the building, a male voice called her name from behind. She turned to see a middle-aged man in a crisp suit, a polite smile on his face. "Pardon me," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Adrian Holloway. I work with certain philanthropic organizations that deal with recovered artworks. I've taken an interest in your painting's backstory." Charlotte shook his hand tentatively. The mention of Holloway piqued her interest. She recalled that name from the foundation event where she'd first met Leonard. Could Adrian be related to that philanthropic group? "I just sold the painting," she said. "I'm sorry, but I don't have it anymore." He nodded politely. "I'm aware, but the secrets behind it fascinate me. If, by any chance, you still have knowledge of the painting's hidden documents, I'd be grateful for a conversation. We at the Holloway Foundation have old records that might help decipher them. You see, my ancestor was once entangled with the Hargrave and Sons network. We've spent decades trying to rectify the damage they caused." Charlotte felt a surge of hope. A philanthropic organization with ties to the Hargrave and Sons fiasco might be exactly what she needed. She gave Adrian her number and promised to be in touch. That night, Charlotte and Kathleen huddled around the glow of a laptop in Kathleen's living room. They inserted the USB drive and opened the high-resolution images. The text was indeed cryptic, referencing account numbers, sums in multiple currencies, and even official stamps from banks in Geneva, London, and Hong Kong. In the margins, Theodore Jacobs had written commentary. "Commissioner insisted I keep these ledgers private, threatened me. Hargrave and Sons is not defunct. Their power extends beyond one continent. A certain Aston family stands to profit from this arrangement. Morally wrong, the painting will hold their guilt." Charlotte's heart pounded when she read the line referencing an Aston family. Her maiden name was Armstrong, so Jacobs likely wasn't referencing her. But Aston was Leonard's surname. Could this ledger be referencing Leonard's ancestors or the men he currently dealt with? "He's an Aston," Kathleen whispered. "So the shadow of Hargrave and Sons might go back generations in his family." Charlotte felt waves of confusion and fear. Did Leonard's father or grandfather also engage in shady deals with Hargrave and Sons? Was her husband continuing a family legacy of corruption? Tears threatened again. She pressed her lips together, determined not to let them flow. Her child's future meant she had to remain strong. They took screenshots, noted as much as they could, then printed some of the pages. Kathleen's contact from her past legal entanglements, a lawyer named Brandon Faulkner, might be able to guide them on how to use this information. He had once helped protect her in the Tyler Hughes case. This time, they hoped he could help Charlotte. They decided to consult him the next morning. That same night, as Charlotte returned to her house still uncertain if she should remain living under the same roof as Leonard, she found him pacing in the living room. He looked disheveled, eyes bloodshot, tie loosened. On the coffee table lay a half-empty glass of whiskey. "Where were you?" Leonard demanded, pointing a shaking finger at her. Charlotte tried to control her breathing. "That's my business. Don't you have secrets of your own?" He threw his head back, exhaling with frustration. "Amelia called me. She said you're rummaging around in things you don't understand, stirring up trouble with the painting. That painting should have just been sold and forgotten. Why can't you let it go?" "Because it involves you, me, our child," Charlotte snapped. "And apparently it involves your family legacy." Theodore Jacobs wrote about an Aston family in his hidden ledger. "Does that mean your father was part of this too?" Leonard's face paled, his lips parted, searching for words. "You don't know what you're talking about," he sputtered at last. "This is bigger than you realize," she sighed, rubbing her temples. "Enlighten me." He sank into the couch, weary. "My grandfather was heavily involved in a banking scandal tied to Hargrave and Sons. It ruined countless families. The fiasco was covered up by the powerful men who profited. I only found out about it recently, when I was approached by a group that threatened to reveal my family's past if I didn't participate in certain deals. I was cornered. They demanded money in exchange for silence. I tried to gather the funds. That's what the hush fund was for, but it became a cycle of extortion. Charlotte's anger flared. "So you risked everything, including your marriage, to hide your grandfather's mistakes." Leonard looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "I did what I thought was necessary to protect my legacy, to protect you, and yes, I kept Amelia by my side because she had connections to these men. She promised to help me navigate their demands. But I realize now how foolish I've been." Silence hung in the air. Leonard's remorse seemed genuine, but his betrayal still stung. Charlotte felt her resolve harden. "I want out," she said, voice shaking with emotion. "I want out of this nightmare. I'm going to see a lawyer tomorrow, someone who understands these financial crimes and can protect me and the baby." Leonard stood, half stumbling toward her. "You'll only put yourself in greater danger." She shook her head. "No, you already did that for me." With those words, she retreated upstairs, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Early the next morning, Charlotte and Kathleen visited Brandon Faulkner at his modest law firm. The attorney, a bespectacled man in his late 30s, with an aura of quiet confidence, welcomed them into his office. After glancing through the documents, he looked troubled. "This is serious," Brandon said, leaning back in his chair. "If these ledgers are accurate, it could implicate multiple parties in historical and ongoing fraud, potentially blackmail, money laundering, even racketeering. The Hargrave and Sons references stand out. They've been the focus of sporadic investigations for decades, but no one has ever pinned them down." Kathleen pressed further. "So what do we do?" "Charlotte just wants to protect herself and her unborn child." Brandon laced his fingers together. "You have a couple of options. One, we can contact the authorities, specifically the white-collar crime division of the FBI. However, that will draw immediate attention. Two, you can take these documents to a reputable investigative journalist, but that also puts you in the crosshairs of whoever is behind Hargrave and Sons." 3. You can attempt a private negotiation with them, but I strongly advise against it. They're not known for fairness. Charlotte's mind swirled with the weight of each option. The idea of stepping into a public investigation made her stomach churn, but the thought of burying the truth, of leaving Hargrave and Sons free to exploit more people, felt equally wrong. "I need time to think," she whispered, tears threatening to spill. "I can't make such a big decision on the spot." Brandon agreed to hold the digital copies securely. "Take your time, but not too long. These kinds of secrets have a way of leaking, and when they leak, people get hurt." Leaving the law office, Charlotte found her phone vibrating non-stop with texts from Amelia. She showed the messages to Kathleen. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. If you go public, you'll regret it." Another followed. "Meet me at the Hargrave Club tonight at 8. We'll settle this quietly." Charlotte's heart pounded. She recalled that the Hargrave Club was an exclusive membership club downtown, rumored to be a front for high society dealings. She typed back, "Why should I trust you?" The reply was immediate. "Because we both care about Leonard." That gave Charlotte pause. Did Amelia truly care about him, or was she simply trying to salvage her own involvement in this labyrinth of criminality? Night descended, and Charlotte, against Kathleen and Brandon's cautious advice, decided to meet Amelia at the Hargrave Club. She arrived in a simple black overcoat, her pregnant belly impossible to hide. The building itself exuded wealth: marble pillars, gold trim, hushed corridors. A concierge escorted her to a private room. Inside, Amelia stood by a glowing fireplace, arms folded. A single chair faced her. Charlotte approached slowly, her eyes flicking around for potential threats. The air smelled of expensive leather and vintage scotch. "You came," Amelia said, her voice neutral. Charlotte nodded, maintaining distance. "What do you want from me?" Amelia took a breath. "I want the original parchment. I know you have scans, but I need the real thing." Charlotte hesitated. "It was sold with the painting. You have it." Amelia shook her head. "The auction house gave me the painting, but apparently withheld the physical parchment for search and authentication. And now word is, it's in your possession or your appraiser's." Charlotte stayed silent, remembering Miriam's procedure. She realized that the original parchment might still be with Rutherford and Company, or had been returned to her in some capacity. She wasn't entirely sure. Amelia's voice dropped lower, stepping forward. "Look, you have to understand. Leonard is in danger. If these secrets about Hargrave and Sons become public, the men controlling this organization will retaliate. They'll punish anyone associated with the painting, even me." Charlotte's anger flared. "So your solution is to keep covering it up?" "I'm trying to protect Leonard," Amelia replied, her tone rising. "Yes, I care about him, more than you might believe, and I know you do too. That's why we should work together." Charlotte's skepticism remained. What if the only way to free Leonard is to expose everything? Amelia's eyes flickered. "I can't force you, but I urge you to consider the consequences. Once this is out, there's no going back. Those men will come for you, for Leonard, for your child. Unless we handle it quietly, in a way that ensures our safety." "You mean hush money?" Amelia said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. Charlotte felt a sense of moral revulsion at the idea of playing into more extortion, yet fear for her baby's life gnawed at her resolve. Suddenly, the door burst open. Leonard stepped inside, face drawn, eyes darting between Charlotte and Amelia. "We have a problem," he said breathlessly. "Someone leaked rumors that the original parchment still exists. My phone is blowing up with threats. They want it, or there will be dire consequences." The tension in the room skyrocketed. Amelia and Charlotte exchanged glances of alarm. If the rumor was out, then they had lost any advantage they might have held. The next move could determine everything. They moved to a quiet corner in the private lounge, away from prying ears. For the first time, the three of them, husband, wife, and mistress, found themselves united in a single cause: survival. Leonard pressed them. "We can't trust the authorities to keep this under wraps. Hargrave and Sons has people everywhere. We need a plan." Charlotte swallowed, eyes locked on the man who once vowed to cherish her. "I talked to a lawyer who said that if we go public, we can ask for protection." "Protection only goes so far," Amelia countered. "These men operate internationally. Witness protection might not save you in the long run. They have resources far beyond anything you can imagine." Leonard rubbed his temples, exhaustion evident. "I'm willing to pay them off one last time if it means protecting you two and the baby. But we'll need to destroy the parchment or get rid of it." Charlotte shook her head, anger slicing through her. "I can't keep being a pawn in your hush money schemes. My grandmother's painting was used to hide these secrets for a reason. Maybe Jacobs wanted them exposed." Silence followed. Amelia looked at Leonard. He stared at the floor. Charlotte felt a flicker of conscience. If she turned over the parchment, she would become complicit in concealing crimes. If she exposed it, she risked the lives of herself and her child. In the end, Leonard spoke. "We'll decide tomorrow. Until then, stay safe, both of you." Charlotte left the Hargrave Club with questions swirling. The line between right and wrong had never felt so blurred. Unable to sleep, Charlotte found herself drawn to the only place that felt comforting: her grandmother Isadora's old home, which now stood empty since her passing. She had a key, having inherited the property. The dusty air smelled of memories. She wandered the halls, eventually settling on a worn couch in the living room. She recalled her grandmother's stories whispered late at night about how a wealthy baron once commissioned a painting from Theodore Jacobs, then threatened the artist's life when Jacobs learned too much. Could that baron have been an ancestor of Leonard's? A wave of sadness engulfed her, tears flowing freely at the thought that the man she loved might be tethered to a legacy of cruelty. She glanced at old photo albums, discovering one from her grandmother's wedding. There, in the background, hung the painting of the mysterious green-eyed woman, still fresh, unaged by time. In another photo, Isadora stood next to a man wearing a signet ring, bearing an intricate H design. Could that have been a sign for Hargrave and Sons, or something else entirely? Through these old photographs, she sensed her grandmother's silent encouragement. "You can break the cycle. The painting was entrusted to you for a reason. The child in your womb deserves a life free from corruption." Summoning fresh resolve, Charlotte decided that she would not let fear dictate her choices. Morning arrived, and with it, a phone call from Adrian Holloway. "We've been analyzing what you sent us," he said. "We have a philanthropic legal team that's prepared to help if you're willing to reveal the entire story to them. Our foundation has been fighting the Hargrave and Sons network for decades. We built alliances within the federal justice system too." Adrian's offer felt like a lifeline. Charlotte weighed his words carefully. She asked if her identity and that of her child could be protected. Adrian assured her they had ways to secure anonymity, at least while building a case. She agreed to meet with him. Later that day, she visited the Foundation's downtown offices. Unlike the opulence of the Hargrave Club, the Holloway Foundation exuded a humble yet professional vibe. Adrian introduced her to a team of lawyers and investigators who specialized in white-collar crimes. One of them, Jane Moriarty, had successfully prosecuted members of the Hargrave and Sons network in the past. Jane explained that going public with the ledger's details was crucial for building a strong case. She also warned Charlotte that once she took this step, the threat level would escalate. However, Jane promised to fast-track Charlotte into a protective arrangement, even if it meant relocating her temporarily. Throughout this conversation, Charlotte's heart pounded with both fear and determination. She thought of the unborn child she carried. Her child deserved a future untainted by bribery or blackmail. She could end the cycle right here. She signed a preliminary agreement, handing over digital copies of the ledger to the Holloway Foundation team. They promised to coordinate with federal agents discreetly. "You're doing the right thing," Adrian assured her. "Theodore Jacobs intended for these secrets to see the light. You're simply fulfilling that mission." That evening, Charlotte returned to the house, her last night there, she suspected. She planned to pack her essentials and move to a safe location arranged by the Foundation. Leonard awaited her in the living room, tension carved into his features. "I heard you met with Adrian Holloway," he said, voice hollow. She nodded. "Yes, I gave him the ledgers. They're building a legal case." Leonard's eyes widened in alarm. "You just signed our death warrant." He paced, mind racing. "Hargrave and Sons won't let you walk away if you expose them." She lifted her chin, defiance in her stare. "The only way to defeat them is to bring them to light. Hiding from the truth only enables them." His lips trembled. "I won't let them hurt you, or our child." "You can help," she said, voice softening. "Testify. Work with the Foundation. Reveal everything you know about their operation. It's the only chance to protect us for real." Leonard hesitated, conflicted. Then, in a barely audible tone, he said, "I'll do it. I'll come clean." He pulled her into a tentative embrace. Charlotte's eyes watered, remembering the warmth they used to share. For a fleeting moment, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could salvage something from the wreckage. In the dead of night, Charlotte's phone rang. She answered drowsily, hearing Amelia's urgent voice. "You've made a huge mistake," she hissed. "Hargrave and Sons knows you've handed over the documents. They plan to make an example of you and Leonard." Charlotte's heart leapt. "How do you know?" Amelia's voice quivered. "Because they reached out to me, demanding I lure you into a trap. I refused, but I don't know what's next. You need to run immediately." Despite her anger toward Amelia, Charlotte recognized genuine fear. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm leaving the country," Amelia said, voice tight. "I suggest you do the same. But if you care about Leonard, get him out too." Charlotte ended the call, adrenaline flooding her system. She shook Leonard awake, explaining Amelia's warning. He grabbed his phone and saw multiple missed calls and threatening messages. "They're serious," he muttered. "We have to go now." Together, they hastily packed a small bag. Charlotte's hands trembled as she considered the baby clothes she'd lovingly folded. She snatched them, refusing to abandon hope for a future. Within minutes, they fled the house, uncertain of their destination but determined to stay alive. They drove through the night, headlights carving a path along deserted highways. Leonard directed them to a remote cabin he once rented for a private retreat in the mountains. En route, Charlotte updated Adrian Holloway. He assured her that federal agents would move quickly, but also warned her to remain hidden until they could set up secure protection. Exhaustion seeped into her bones, but fear kept her awake. Every passing car felt like a potential threat. In the back of her mind, she wondered if Amelia had truly left the country, or if the Mistress had another angle. Yet, for now, the immediate danger overshadowed personal grievances. Upon reaching the cabin, they locked the doors and closed the blinds. The chill mountain air seeped through the thin walls, but Charlotte felt a small measure of relief. Here, at least, they weren't easily traced. Early morning brought a flurry of activity. Texts from Adrian, calls from Brandon Faulkner, updates from the Foundation's legal team. An anonymous tip had led the authorities to investigate certain executives connected to Hargrave and Sons. High-profile arrests were already in motion in multiple cities. Charlotte clung to that hope like a lifeline. Maybe they would be safe soon. 2 days later, the federal agents arrived at the cabin. Charlotte and Leonard were escorted to a secure facility for debriefing. Leonard supplied everything he knew about the modern version of Hargrave and Sons: names, accounts, meetings. Combined with the historical ledgers from Theodore Jacobs, the case was ironclad. The FBI prepared to dismantle the organization. Word came that Amelia Delacroix was detained at the airport attempting to board a private jet. She claimed she was fleeing for her life, not evading justice. The authorities, however, needed her testimony as well. In exchange for leniency, Amelia agreed to corroborate Leonard's story. All loose ends began to knot together into a comprehensive takedown. Despite her heartbreak, Charlotte found a small sense of gratitude that Amelia cooperated. Perhaps the mistress also deserved a chance to redeem herself. 6 months later, Charlotte sat in a modest, sunlit house, provided by the Witness Protection Program. Her belly was no longer just a gentle curve, she was days away from giving birth. Leonard, following his cooperation, received a reduced penalty probation under strict supervision. They lived under new identities, but at least they were free from the immediate threat of Hargrave and Sons. The day the baby arrived, an early morning in spring, Charlotte felt a rush of emotions so profound it eclipsed all the fear and betrayal of the past. Holding her tiny daughter, she whispered soft assurances of a life unshackled by darkness. Leonard, tears streaming, pressed a gentle kiss to the baby's forehead. She saw in his eyes a genuine resolve to atone for his mistakes. He vowed never to let greed or secrets endanger their family again. Far away, the original Theodore Jacobs painting hung in the private collection of the government's evidence archives. The hidden parchment, once a dire secret, had shattered the power of a corrupt organization. Theodore Jacobs's legacy, as well as the Armstrong family's trust in honesty, had finally found resolution. Every choice Charlotte made, selling a single painting, uncovering a century-old ledger, confronting her husband's infidelity, brought her to a crossroads between secrecy and truth. That painting, steeped in hidden records of corruption, ultimately exposed a dangerous syndicate. Through betrayal and fear, Charlotte and Leonard emerged with a fresh resolve to protect their child's future. Their journey reveals the power of confronting injustice head-on, even when the cost is steep. Thank you for joining us on this tumultuous saga of hidden legacies, family betrayal, and the unwavering resilience of a pregnant wife who dared to seek the truth. If you found this story gripping and want more high-stakes drama, don't forget to hit that like button, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and be sure to subscribe for more compelling narratives. Spread the word so others can uncover the secrets within this incredible tale.